Everyone, we'll give it a minute to get started. Let me share. As usual, if you have any agenda items, we can put them on now. I mean, other than the two that are here, obviously. All right, so we'll give it we'll just give a couple more minutes. I think we'll get started at 5 after. So Laura has a readout on POC work and OPI API demo for OCP.
Is this the part where I go on camera?
No, we don't. We don't.
You guys don't look at each other.
No one. No. This on this call, no one goes on camera.
Why is that? Are you guys just shy?
No, every call has its own
Je ne sais quoi. Yeah.
tone and tenor.
Uh-huh.
And it's early.
It is early in my
here on the West Coast.
I mean, 7 a.m. calls being on camera is kind of iffy.
It's a lot to ask. I agree. I'm feeling pretty puffy right now, but it's weird. I just have a hard time presenting. So
Yeah, don't worry. We're a bunch of kittens when it comes to people presenting. We love it.
Hi, Dan. How's the airport?
Pretty good.
Good. Good.
It was the strangest thing last night. I was half the way up the peninsula to San Francisco in a place called Burlingame, and it was 82 degrees at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it was warm last night.
And I'm like, if I wanted to live in Houston, I'd still be living in Houston. I moved here 30 years ago because I didn't want to live in Houston.
Yeah. That's a thing.
Completely crazy. I mean, this used to be the standard weather when I was on the Gulf Coast. It's just nuts. Anyway.
Yeah, it's hot here in Bay Area. I'm down here for a conference, and it's not cold. I was outside yesterday. It was 90 degrees. So, and Venkat, I saw Keysight's ad as soon as I came in at the airport. That was pretty cool.
Like, Cisco and Keysight took over San Jose Airport for almost a year or two, feels like.
Right.
Detail, actually.
Yeah. Venkat's probably the most famous of us.
You have to. There always has to be one.
All right, it's 5 after. So Laura, please get started.
Yeah, sure. So, as you all know, we're trying to build an abstraction solution, right, for the products that we're all offering. And the F5 team, about, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe, was it, or 8 months ago, presented a solution for the proof of concept group to ideally move forward with. If you guys want, I can pull it up and we can refresh on it, or I can just jump into sort of the details. Does anybody need to take a look at it? Or are you guys familiar with it enough that I can just dive in?
Why don't you give us the refresher and set the context for us for a little bit, and then
Okay.
if we have any questions, then
Great.
dive into your second part.
Okay, so can I take over the screen share, please?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So as you guys may recall, Tim Worsley, who used to work at F5, who went off to go build some stuff in the world, built a proposal to the proof of concept group to leverage Nginx open source as the first workload for OPI. And he presented it essentially as, because of the fact that we're delivering hardware acceleration, or everyone's delivering a hardware acceleration opportunity, it requires a workload to accelerate, and OPI needs its application deployment and configuration tested. Essentially, how are the cards coming up? Closed source workloads would have been harder to play with for all sorts of reasons. And Nginx is a fairly well-known option in the open source community. And lots of you guys already want to accelerate Nginx, and Nginx itself works well on our processors. So we basically, I'm going to jump through this slide because I think it's kind of complex, but we basically built out a solution where we would have a traffic source and leveraging the DPU, slowly build out a solution, or ideally build out a solution to connect the Nginx proxy with Nginx web servers in clusters leveraging Red Hat on the DPU. So what we started with was this. What we're moving towards is this, where we have a traffic source, we have a VLAN with the goodness that's being built at OPI, and an ARM host and a bare metal host on the same environment with a whole bunch of web servers behind them where we're pushing traffic through. We're pretty close to this, or we're getting closer to this. Right now, we're about here in the story, which is pretty amazing. We've got the Marvell CN1026 up and running on an HP Ampere, sorry, not an Ampere, an DL380 with an x86 in it. We're having trouble with everybody in the ARM servers, but that's a different conversation. We're making progress with everybody's hardware is really the bottom line. And what we want to do is go to OCP and show the work that we've done to this point, and also show the goal of what we're trying to do. And that's something that we plan to do the 17th through the 19th in partnership, essentially with all of you.
And with ARM.
And with ARM. ARM
Yeah,
is
Mark is
ARM, it's ARM's booth, and we will be at ARM's booth talking about the OPI use case that we have built. That was to the point, right?
Yep. That's it.
Do you guys have questions? Or are you not sure what they are yet?
So just to clarify, right, OCP is like one milestone in this journey. The expectation is that this continues to grow and gets developed and brought up on all DPU cards available. And then, really showing the power of DPU cards running on multiple servers, the same interface, which I think is amazing.
Laura, one question. Micha built something as a test jig for this early on. Do you know if that got used? Because we have a booth at OCP, and if possible, we could put it there also on the showcase, if it helps. Sometimes it may be good to show it in one place instead of two places, but sometimes multiple places is better.
I think we'd be happy to work between booths. I don't know. The only concern I have right now is time, all right, because we're getting a little short on time. But and I don't know what that means to everybody else on the call. I defer to you guys, and the only The only complexity is bodies and time right now. We're really working hard to get to this week, if we can. Right now we're about here. Sorry, yeah, right now I'm about here. But we really want to get to this week if we can, and be able to say with some certainty that this is the way it plays. But you know, anytime you're moving around in a space that's new, you run into roadblocks, and we run into some both of our own technical roadblocks of our own limitations, and also limitations of hardware along the way and software. So we don't know what we're going to run into between here and here. But yeah, I think it would be really cool to be able to be at both the ARM booth and the Keysight booth. Marvell has a booth there as well. I just don't know how we would do that from a body standpoint. We probably have to talk about that offline. But it's the story is OPI. The story is not this vendor or that vendor. So yeah, we should be working between booths.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Other way is that you have it in one place, and you know, you can redirect. We just put you know, a fairly generic material on OCP overview and say, hey, you know, we have a demo, you know, please go to this place. And because each of these booths are in different locations, and sometimes some are not quite at a place attractive, right?
Right.
And some sees more foot traffic just by the location. So, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Venkat. And I think, you know, and the reality is we're, you know, we've got NVIDIA cards up at this point. We've got CN 1026s up. We're waiting for Intel's cards. So, you know, we want to make sure that the story isn't one vendor. The story is multiple vendors in multiple places in the environment, right? So any way that we can get the story through the community is the right way.
I also have a speaking slot at the event, and I'm happy to call out the teams that are there, right, from OPI. It's going to be a DPU talk, and I'm really focusing on the collaboration, the link between OCP projects like System Ready, which sits there, and then the need for higher level alignment, right, that extends into OPI and the work we're doing there. So I'm happy to connect with folks that need to, or that can be, you know, where we can add information on the booth and bring visibility to our work.
Yeah, and as both you, Mark, and Tim had pointed out in the chat, this isn't the last opportunity. We want this to be the first opportunity to present this. So I think someone had suggested to Paul and I that we do bring this up at what's the next one coming up, Paul?
Someone suggested we bring it to MWC.
Yeah,
Mobile World Congress.
So I think
I'm sure there'll be others that we bring it up at as well. But
yeah, as this builds and as this grows, we want to position this in other places so people see the power of the technology that we're delivering, and also the power of this partnership. We want to make sure that that DPU technology isn't simply for the hyperscaler.
Yeah, and that's the message we've been trying to get across to people, is that the value proposition of the hyperscalers is real. That track is continuing.
Yep.
And much of that value can be realized by telco and enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes it takes a bit of common APIs, common software, and it takes a bit of acceptance. And the acceptance cycle to go from a hardware cloud technology into those other areas is not always slow in calendar time, at least historically. Software methodologies get adopted a lot sooner than fairly significant hardware shifts. So so in doing this work for this POC, you must have come up with, here's what we would like to see next, or if we had this other thing, it would be nice, or problem you hit that was tricky to work around that could be fixed. All those kind of usual softball presentation review questions. What can we do different, better, more to to have made this, that if you had this, this would have been easier? Or, you know, another way to put this is, or a second question is, you know, what are the lessons learned about actually doing this? Because as I recall, when we launched this, you know, it was like, well, this should be fairly straightforward, although that was one thing we're trying to prove out. And the second thing was just showing that we can do it at all has value.
Yeah, sure, Boris. Hold on a second. I think those are really important questions, and those are things we've been trying to track as we've gone along. Different platforms. One of the things that we at least ran into with Marvell was that the cards that they gave us, or the cards that we purchased, are pre-released. So it's hard to say something is or isn't perfect, right? So we tried to track our installation process and what we ran into with that, but you know, we're still sort of at a nascent stage with the BF3s. We have them up and running and we have RHEL on them, but we don't have this environment yet on those. We'll do the same with the Intel cards once we get them, but some of the problems that we've run into have been like just time to getting them to us. Like we would have loved to have done this much sooner. Or components, right? There are different components for different environments. There are places where vendors have tested things already and places where they haven't. But we also try to be sensitive to the fact that there's stuff that we don't know because nobody's built this yet. This is a new environment technically. And so because of the fact that this is a new environment, everybody, or a lot of the people that are working on it or helping to instantiate it, don't necessarily know how to use all of the pieces in the environment to pull it together the way that we envision it. We envision the outcome. So I think when you're partnering with other companies to build something, and when you're building something internally with your own teams, there's always that tension between when there's a problem, who owns the problem? And there's always that tension between who's got the right knowledge to answer the question that you need answered, or is there something that's just not going to work? But because of the fact that most of these, at least the software side solutions, have already been used for many years and have a certain amount of maturity, a lot of the problems that we've run into so far have really just been, we had to figure out the right person to talk to get us where we needed to go. That said, you know, we need to figure out how to streamline and make more efficient this type of an installation process. Yeah, because you have to find the experts in your own organization or external to you. Go ahead, Boris.
Just a couple of questions, if you don't mind. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the presentation. So I want to understand two things. First of all, is the technical difficulties to spin up this environment. Like maybe we can, or we already have it, but for me, at least in my mind, I need to break it into smaller pieces and digest it. Yep. Right? For example, installing SNO on the DPU, number one, right? Deploying Nginx proxy inside, or connecting the networking, like provisioning lifecycle. So why was this such a, or is continuing to be such a difficult a problem? This is a mystery to me, because from all the components, it looks like everything should be done in a couple of hours. So I'm exaggerating. So we need to, I would like to understand, like,
you build it, Boris.
I did build something like this, yes.
Good. So was it easy for you?
Yeah.
Good. That's actually really good to know, because we need somebody that we can partner with who's built something like this for when we have questions. So not everybody in our organization is an expert on installing Red Hat SNO. We do have plenty of expertise around Nginx. Just like OPI has complexity with getting people in the room, sometimes we have complexity with making sure we have the right people to talk to. And I think
I understand. So I think, again, for me at least, it will be nice to see, or at least to talk through the difficulties. So because I'm thinking ahead, I'm thinking like, okay, we did this work, like, what do we publish? Do we publish
Right.
instructions like if you have this DPU card, this is how you install SNO, this is how you deploy in the Unix install. So actually show the recipes and the scripts to do this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, because I'm thinking like, what is the outcome of this except for the demo, right?
The list,
Boris, some of the difficulty for us was even outside of what OPI is doing. It was down to
no, but-
hardware working in the particular box that we have, optics that we had on hand that would and would not work with particular cards,
okay, so there,
making sure all the cables were correct. Those sorts of things
yeah, but there are okay, so
caused a
there,
lot of delay.
there are three classes of problem, and they would all be good to highlight as Boris was just explaining. The first class is, hey, you've got a DP, you just want to use it. How does that happen? And I hadn't appreciated the value of that before, but maybe that's something, and that would come down to the optics and the physical installation and that sort of thing. The second class of problem is if you have a particular vendor's DPU, how do you make use of that vendor's DPU in the most consistent way possible? And then the third one, which I'm most interested in, is what APIs we're missing, or what API should we develop, or doing this work, what did you find? And again, this is to the heart of Boris's problem, because he's like, hey, I've done this and it was pretty easy for what I did, but maybe there's something different here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
For example, instead of SNO, I used Rancher RK2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we found that there was a I don't know what version of Linux our E&E put on the card, but when he was struggling with container networking, he had a harder time with Red Hat SNO than he did with the containerized Linux that he was using. So because he was trying to troubleshoot the problem set that he had. Other engineers that we talked to didn't have as hard of a time with RHSNO because of their specific experience. So I think
I'm not diminishing the work. That's perfectly fine. I'm just thinking ahead.
No, I know you're
what
not.
do we publish as an outcome?
Right.
Maybe what we publish is instructions. This is how we do.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry, I should have dove into specifics. I think it's as interesting as you do for us.
Yeah. I agree. And the other question is that I have is, I'm not actually seeing any value of OPI in any of this work, right?
It's actually
none of the API were used. ZTP, DHCP, none of this is still being used. Deployment is, Nginx. So I'm just thinking, brainstorming. I don't know the answer. Where the API is actually used?
Here. The value is in VLAN 30, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. So
I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Our hope is to show, and where we're at right now, we're not there yet, but to use the OPI APIs to bring each of these cards up to a place where we can manually then install the operating system we choose, in this case Red Hat SNO, on the card, and then installing Nginx is just using regular container commands. It's not an OPI type thing. It could be that we we find a way to create an image that has an operating system and Nginx on it. That we create an API to deploy on the cards itself, to provision on the cards. That would be of value, I think, to people.
Yeah, because if we talk about real production deployments that we see in the industry or been dealing with until today, right? There is an absolutely path of shipping this pre-install from the factory, number one. Number two is late bind. And late bind, we see two flavors of it. First of all is zero touch. And second is orchestrated. So, for example, if you take OpenStack and Ironic, they kind of do orchestrated deployment. So they're using out-of-band, for example, to deploy images. So basically, orchestration is responsible for deploying things on the DPU, and not DPU is trying to onboard itself using something like FDO or secure zero-touch provision.
Yep.
So still, for me, the value of OPI is very much unclear. Yeah, we can publish the scripts, like Dan is also advocating for this in the chat. That's perfectly fine, and publish the script and the recipe. This is how you do it. But frankly speaking, I'm not seeing any kind of OPI value.
Yeah, the OPI value that will showcase, assuming we get this across all the cards done, is the provisioning of the cards. So you have a card, you turn it on, and you use the OPI APIs and zero touch provisioning to get it up on the network and get it functioning to
So
the point where
provisioning,
you could.
yeah. So provisioning, absolutely. Monitoring, absolutely. We just merge all our gRPC code. We merge OpenTelemetry SDK orchestration, and we ship all the traces and metrics out of the car. So this is a new addition I completed this week. So all of that is great.
Perfect.
I think that the additional thing that we can think is, I think, Laura, on your slide, step number 5, I think, you started to talk about performance testing and offloads. So, okay, we are running nginx as is, which is probably OPI didn't have anything to do with that because you deployed it using regular OpenShift or Helm charts or OpenShift container APIs. That's fine. But then when we start to talk about offloading things, this becomes interesting. For somebody like you to actually utilize the hardware capabilities of the DPU per different vendor, what you will have to create, you will have to create 3, 4, 5, 10 different versions and integrate with each and every library. For example, NVIDIA publishes Docker library, you'll have to compile with Docker. To provide that kind of abstraction. If Marvell has Marvell SDK, Intel has Intel SDK. So in order to start utilizing the nginx offloads for performance testing, for example, if you want to offload some kind of encryption or traffic offload or whatever, well, then we have a problem. And I think here in this space, particularly OPI can play a really good role, is underneath. So between the nginx and the hardware, the libraries that we have and the abstraction that we can build over there, this is of an interest, and this is what we can develop in.
Yeah, so right. So
okay.
Did you guys? So what did you guys find along the lines Boris is asking? That's what kind of all these questions are pointing to.
Right. So far, we found that the out-of-box experience with all these cards is bad. Don't know how else to say it. It's difficult to get a card, take it out, figure out, okay, I've got this card. Oh, it didn't come with I've got to go find a specific cable, aux cable for the server that I'm using. Oh, I've got to have these specific types of optics that's not documented in a clear way on this manufacturer's website. Oh, I've got to plug it in. Oh, okay. Now how do I get an image on this card? How do I update the firmware? Oh, this card has got 2 different boot locations and 3 different flavors of getting at those boot locations and configuring them. I've got to go read the docs and figure that out. Oh crap, I didn't hit F11 in time. I've got to go back and let it boot and do it again. So all of those sorts of things are difficulties we ran into. So far we've documented those with one manufacturer's cards. We're in the middle of documenting that with another. And we're giving that feedback back to the manufacturers. Not using even OPI, just trying to get this card functioning and getting power and on a network is a difficult thing.
So that is something we could publish. There are a lot of websites out there that have that kind of practical, here's how you deal with card X instruction across sets of cards for a particular purpose.
And it's been
if I want to use my GPU in my new desktop for AI, there are a lot of how-tos out there for that, and that generates a lot of traffic and interest.
Yep,
Because,
we could do that.
Okay.
At this point, what has come is vendor one has updated their documentation to include to remove the assumptions that the engineer that wrote the documentation had when he wrote the documentation. Because we tried to go into this with no assumptions. Like, oh, I've got to install Minicom to get to this card. Didn't know that. Oh, you can't use that version of Minicom. It's got to be this version. Stuff like that is just assumed. Oh, you've got to change hardware flow control. That wasn't mentioned anywhere. So it's those sorts of things that we've documented, and vendor number one has fixed that. Vendor number two took a bunch of feedback like that as well and has updated their process so far. We haven't played with an Intel card yet because they shipped yesterday, Laura.
I
to
believe
us.
so. Yeah, was my understanding.
So we haven't touched one or put it in a server yet. So when we'll do that with vendor three.
The tertiary thing that we're finding sort of repeatedly is that nobody has actually tested their cards on an ARM server. They've
That too.
They've all done their development via x86 on the cards themselves when they're playing with servers. The one thing that I actually have a question about is about SCTP, and this is sort of a side question, and it actually serves all of us. Boris, are you the person that built SCTP, or is somebody else?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a very neophyte software engineer I've tasked with making sure that those APIs are on our VLAN 30. Is it possible for you to help him or find somebody in your team that can help him with that?
Sure, we can
Having some
schedule a call.
problems with it. He's a very nice person and very quiet.
Yeah.
He's a very sweet kid.
I'll try to be nice.
So treat him like one.
He is. Yeah,
He's really
he's
sweet, and I don't know exactly what he thinks, but it's taken me a long time to get him to admit when things are broken. Or when he can't solve a problem. He does it with other engineers, but he won't do it with me, so he's a little shy.
Yeah, no problem. I can jump on a call. Let me know.
I'll ping you offline, Boris. Thanks. So I think
Laura, I have another question.
I actually have a question for you, Boris. There is something that I think is really kind of, when you're talking about deep technical issues, and when you're talking about something that we all really want to be valued, right? I think something that's sort of repeatedly lost in translation when you're talking about engineering and you're talking about business value is that we've actually built a pretty impressive partnership here between organizations that would not have normally partnered and would not have naturally partnered. And being able to just fundamentally show that and instantiate that change. And I realize that's a little hokey, but it's actually very true that you guys are sort of have worked very hard together to build something or try to build something for a community. And Boris, you have actually a pretty key piece of input here with having built the protocol that you built.
Just about all of it.
Right. And that's something that I realize that you're going to keep questioning and keep digging and keep pushing, but there is actually pause for reflection there. And it does merit mention that a community has built something in a space that normally would not get done. And I know that you're going to keep pushing the line on that, which is critical to make it successful. And that's what the value is there. But you basically, by just sitting down and saying, let's solve this problem, have made a huge change. So that actually does merit recognition, because I watch people inside of companies constantly not be willing to solve problems. So the fact that a community exists externally that does that is pretty massive, especially in this space.
Oh, I don't disagree, but I always drive to excellence and more results, more outcome. That's why I'm keep pushing.
Right. And that's transparent. So I do think that does need to get recognized. And I think that is, I mean, even if we hadn't gotten to the point in the use case, we still would have shown this is what we're working towards, because it's really important for people to have transparency and visibility into it and be interested in it and support it. So I do have to drop off pretty fast because I have to run to an offsite. But Boris, I'll be reaching out to you on offline, and anybody who has thoughts, please obviously let Tim and Paul know and the rest of us know. And Joseph, I'm looking forward to reading your notes. I took a bunch of them myself.
Yeah, if you have notes, you can either add them directly or send them to me, and
Okay.
I'll integrate them. Up to you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Just a few notes, and again, the most important. I mean, I like what you said about what's important about this outcome, and this is again why we said, yeah, this is a good thing to do, and understanding what the difficulties are, especially for new teams, is important. I think capturing the difficulties and the list of things that could be improved or that we need to provide, we could provide OPI guidance around, even if it was very straightforward how-tos or config scripts,
Yep.
has value by itself. And then we can drive towards, you know, the much more interesting future that Boris is outlining.
Yes.
So
Yep.
if you guys could capture what you've learned, and then let's publish it. Let's review it and publish it. So
We
you know,
need to be sensitive to the fact that every vendor is going to come in with a frame of reference, and we need to make sure that those vendors give approval before we publish anything.
that's fine. Well, then we'll get approval. Then we'll do. Then let's get approval, and let's say
Yep.
if it's been addressed. You know, you can say, you know, hit an initial thing. Vendor addressed it. It's life is wonderful.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, thank you, Laura. And F5 team, that was an excellent discussion.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I'm really, really happy to be at the place that we're at, and I think it's really cool. And we just need to keep the momentum up. It's easy to get a little slowed down in spots, and I'm glad that everybody is continuing to push this forward. It's super fun to be involved with, and it's nice to be on a project that is like fun. So with everybody enthusiastic and caring about it. So thanks for your time, everybody. I'm going to drop off. Have a great day, Boris.
All right,
Thanks,
yep,
Laura.
thank you very much.
Just to follow up with one question,
Yeah.
I want to understand one thing. From what was presented, I just, because Ronnie here from NVIDIA on the call, I want to understand what is the relationship of this with, because this was obviously tested with Bluefield 3 as well. But what is the relationship between this and the Docker services? Because from the Docker services documentation on the website, I see a lot of similarities. Either with host-based networking, I think they also have secure pipe and then NGINX as well, and the firewall inside. So I'm just trying to understand the relationship and the thinking between this and that.
At this point, the where we're at is with the Bluefield 3 is that we have a card in a host. The host has an approved version of Red Hat running on it as the Linux, so that we can install Docker and continue on the process with that card. We've had difficulties, and we're still having problems with the aux power cord. Every time we plug it in, the card will not, the host will not post. So, and we've gone back and forth with HP, the vendor, and NVIDIA to figure that issue out. So we're running the card without the aux cable, which we've been told should be fine. It just won't perform as well. But that has been kind of the blocker for doing the work that we've done with the Marvell card so far. Is we finally got to a point where we heard earlier this week, just go ahead and use it without the aux cable and try and run this. So we're now at a place where we'll start running through the DOCA procedures to use the NVIDIA process for bringing this card up and document that.
I'm not talking about
So that's where we're at with it.
I'm not talking about bringing up the card. That's understandable.
Yeah.
What you said is fine. What I'm saying is, and Ronnie here unmuted himself, maybe he wants to comment. I'm saying that from software perspective and from solution perspective, NVIDIA has all that you've done as a reference implementation already.
Yep.
I'm just wondering how this work and NVIDIA Docker. Ronnie, maybe you can comment.
So yes, as you can see in video, and that's the Docker, also the documentation that we have on the web, we're trying to give as much as possible examples for user to use it. And there are few levels in Docker, right? You can either, you mentioned that you want to have it as a Linux and install and run basic stuff and the provisioning, and it's kind of deep, right? Like if how you run Docker flow, for example, and accelerate a specific application, I don't like OVS or that we already have integration with, or for the example, the F5, how you connect a specific customer like F5 or I don't know application, or you mentioned also here the Nginx. So we do work on how to accelerate, but specific engines. For example, the Nginx can use the KTLS, right? That's used in the kernel, and in order to accelerate the IPsec. So all those things are the same things that we do also for the host, most of them. So there's a few levels of integration that's you can actually do, and the problem that's I think it's challenging. Is that you have many type of customers, right? You have a customer that's want to buy a black box with a CLI that's do I don't know something. You have more vendors that's like ISV that's know what they're doing and want to use the acceleration and adding rules, to the specific hardware. But they have their own application that can run on the ARM. You have CSPs that's, I don't know, asking for more details and how exactly to do their own stuff. So you have a lot of different levels of customers also.
Exactly. And Ronnie, at this point, where we're at is we haven't gotten to the point reading through the Docker documentation to say, now we're ready to look at the examples that you have. We're at the point with our engineers that, okay, how do I arshim to the card to see what's happening on it? That's where we're at with it. So I hesitate to even ask for a link to where the example documentation is, because I want the engineer who's working on this to try and find it on their own and point out where that was difficult, if it was difficult. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you know the name Docker and you will Google it, you will have a Docker community site.
Yep.
So it will be easy.
Good.
And don't tell your engineers, I'll post a link for just one example application, which is NAT, for example, or L4 firewall. So it's just a card that's shipping out of the factory with pre-installed OS. You can just run this application and that's it. So it should be extremely easy in NVIDIA case, unless I'm...
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, but that's if you're running the okay, so it's come with installed OS, which is not Reddit, right?
Right.
If you start, and that's, the reason what you want to do. You want to start fresh and bring your own OS. So let's make life harder, right?
Yeah, I realize it's going to make life harder, but yes. And I know that doing things like not purchasing pre-built systems from a vendor that have these cards in them, which was impossible for us to source. We had to find different ways to source these cards, and we put them in our own servers, which makes it difficult. Again, there are compatibility issues that we're running into.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
We understand that. We're trying to take and this is true, the folks working on this, I never touched a DPU, but I want to bring one up and put my application on it. How difficult is that with the publicly available information out there?
Yeah.
And
So
again, if you're trying to put DPUs on, ARM server, say, alternate kind of server, then, and you learn how to do that, and are willing to publish it, that is something fantastic to publish.
Yeah.
And say for, you know, for NVIDIA, for Marvell, for Intel, for AMD, here's what you do. Here are the steps for doing that. That by itself has value. In fact, that's one of the things we should do with the lab is basically record the steps it took to bring the thing up to a state where it looks like a Linux box that you can talk to.
Yep. Yep.
And show that. I mean, that's that again, the really simple stuff is worth showing as well. I mean, it's not all complicated giant networking stacks. The simple stuff matters, and the behavior on the PCI matters, and that sort of thing, right?
And is it a true guess, Paul, that after you showcase with NGINX, obviously you'll switch to F5 proprietary software, right?
That is a good guess. We'll switch first probably to Nginx Plus, which is the non-open source version of Nginx, and then we'll switch to working with the other F5 property products as well. One of the difficulties for F5 specifically is that we don't yet have a publicly available version of our big IP that runs on ARM. It's all x86 based. So putting it on an ARM processor on these DPUs is at this point a POC project within a parallel POC project within F5.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks, Paul.
Any other questions or discussion from anyone? All right. I think that was an excellent topic for today. Great discussion. I think there's some follow-up that will lead to things being basically published that are valuable.
Yeah.
Excellent work.
So, kind of who all is going to be at OCP conference this next, well, the 17th through the 19th. I'm going to be there. I know Mark's going to be there.
I'm there too. Yeah, we have a booth.
Will be there.
Yeah, we have a booth, and then I will talk to Mircha. He's just coming back.
Yeah, I'll be there too.
Oh, you're here.
Okay, great.
Also, folks from NVIDIA, I know that Elad will be there.
He was telling me he might not be able to be there. Getting a.
Yeah, we're getting the past. We'll figure that out.
You figured that out for him. Good.
We're working on it.
Yeah, that's the 17th through the 19th, correct?
I think so. Yes. What day is your talk, Mark?
It's on the first day on Tuesday at 12:25, and it's in the Expo Hall. So this is one of those more informal sessions that we get as a platinum sponsor. And we've decided to shift the message from just an ARM message to really a DPU OPI message, which I'm taking charge. So I need to share that presentation with folks here so we can make sure it's got all the information we want to share, the latest updates.
I mean, if you're using the standard content, we'd love to review and, you know, help you with anything you need. But if you're using kind of the standard slides that we've used before, you know, we don't need to do a meticulous review, but we'd love to help you and provide input if you need it. And if you want to introduce a bunch of new stuff, then we ought to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's a little more specific, right? I want to call out the demos that are on the booth, this work that we're talking about with F5.
Yeah.
So there is a bit more content than just the generic slides. I did start with the generic slides that we've created in the outreach committee, but there's more.
Well, yeah, and then there was the presentation, you know, Dan delivered at.
That's right, at SNIA.
At SNIA, right? The Storage Developer Conference. And again, you can look at the slides I delivered at SNIA for kind of general overview. You can look at what Dan presented for the use the POCs, and you can crib from those as much as you like. And we're happy to review everything with you. We can do it in this call next week if you want to do it there, or do it in the outreach call, or we could do it in a one-off session. Just set it up and pick a time, and you know,
Yeah,
Will do.
to help you. Just yeah. All right, cool. Anything else? And yeah, since OCP's in San Jose, I might try to get there for one of the days.
okay.
I hadn't already planned on it, but that I think there are a few things happening where that might be useful for me for other reasons as well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, going once, going twice, sold. Thank you very much, everyone. Great discussion. Good questions, Boris, as usual.
Yes.
All right, later, guys.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.